Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Dynasty Dark. I'm your host, Calvin Timms. You can find me over on Twitter at TD Calvin and back solo. Weird schedules this week, just kind of different videos on my own. But I am continuing with the 2023 Offseason Recap. If this is your first video, thank you for checking us out. We're doing all 32 NFL teams, and it's been a fun off season, but it's slowly coming to an end, and we're almost done with all the divisions. Today we're going through the Atlanta Falcons and starting the NFC South. And the Falcons, man, I gotta say, every couple of years I get some underdog teams that I like to root for. A couple years ago it was Washington with Kirk Cousins. I was really hoping that they could be a little bit better. Then it kind of slowly morphed into the Detroit Lions and what they're doing with Dan Campbell. And I gotta say, I do like what the Atlanta Falcons have going on. I'm rooting for this team. I actually think that this team is going to win the NFC South this upcoming season. If you look at what they did last year and then what they were able to add in the offseason, it makes a lot of sense to me personally that they're going to be able to improve on that and get back to the top. Now, they had a big offseason, and I want to talk through all of the changes. Well, most of the changes, the impactful key changes there. But, we have to start with the draft or with the free agency. We'll get to the draft here in just 1 minute. And if this is your first episode with us, thank you for checking it out again. And we will be talking about every single positional player for the offensive side of the ball, their dynasty impacts and everything like that here at the end. But we're going through all the offseason changes first, and they brought in so many guys. It was crazy. They tried to really revamp this defense on the fly, and I can respect it quite a bit. You look at the names of the guys that they brought in, and they are heavy hitters. Now, we'll talk about the roster construction here in just a little bit, but some of the names that they brought in, right? Jesse Bates, the third from Cincinnati, one of the best safeties in the league right now, by far. David Onyemata, defensive tackle from New Orleans, division rival. They were able to snag him. Caleb McGarry they re-signed him. He's a very good right tackle for the team. He's developed into a very good offensive lineman. They brought in Taylor Heineke to be the backup to Desmond Ridder if Ridder does not take that second-year leap. Calais Campbell, defensive end. You're going to see a lot of names that you probably have heard over the last couple of years. Bud Dupree, linebacker, who's played with Tennessee. He's getting a little bit older, but still very good. Mike Hughes, cornerback from Detroit. Trey Flowers, cornerback from Cincinnati. They brought him over as well. The list just keeps going. Kadero Hodge, wide receiver. They re-signed him. Michael Pruitt, tight end. They re-signed him. Is there any other big names here? I don't think so. Joe Gaziano is probably the other big name from the Chargers. And yeah, they didn't really lose too many big names either in free agency, which is why I love it so much. Some of the guys that they did lose, Anthony Ferkser, Chuma Odoga, tackle there. But yeah, really kept it pretty clean for this last offseason. And this is why I really like what this team is doing and why I think they're going to win the NFC South. When you're able to completely retool your defense, the Atlanta Falcons defense has been terrible for a long time. And you can get some of those big names. They finally spend some of that money. A lot of people look at 2022 and say, man, they were really bad with a fairly decent roster, right? Well, one, they didn't trust Marcus Mariota, but people kind of seem to forget that when they traded Matt Ryan, they were paying about $50 million in dead cap by moving him last year. When you're taking 25% of your salary cap and just saying nobody can touch it for this year, you don't get to replace it with another player. You're just counting it as gone, right? That's a big impact on a team just in general for one player taking up 25% of your salary cap. So I do think that they were trying to work within that last year. And yeah, I think that what they're set up to do is going to be very good. Now, you look at what they did in the draft, and this is where people really wondered what was going to happen. So, they retooled their entire defense in the free agency period. they add a few pieces. They re-signed a few key pieces on the offensive side of the ball, and they had the number 8 overall pick, number 38 overall as well. You're going, man, they're really primed to take a quarterback here if they really want to. Will Levis is available. Will Levis is available. That's all you heard. Oh, are they going to trade up to top 3 just to go and jump the Colts to try and get one of these quarterbacks? And what did they do? Rumors started happening towards the end of the draft cycle. They might be taking Bijan. Bijan's a really good player. We don't know where Bijan's going to go. This guy is a blue chip, can't miss prospect, and we have no idea where he's going to go. Well, maybe Atlanta likes him, but that'd be kind of silly. They're top 8. They could get a quarterback, and ultimately they decide to go Bijan Robinson, the running back drafted around the world. It was crazy, the reactions to this, because not only is it probably one of the best running back slots for a player of Bijan Robinson's caliber, but also it was a massive need for the team, a massive opportunity for the team, right? And the scheme is just built for someone like a Bijan. And I really love this signing. This offense is completely loaded. And if they ever do, if they stink again, right? And that's the benefit of this. Next year is a better, air quote, better quarterback class than it was this last season and off season. And I really think that if they're bad, they're setting themselves up well. Now, where it could bite them is if they're good enough to win the NFC South, but not good enough to do anything in the playoffs, which we'll see this upcoming season. But if that's kind of the case, then that could really bite them, where they do become like the old Washington Redskins at the time, Commanders now, where they were always finishing somewhere between 12 and 20, right? Every single season. You're never bad enough to go and get one of those elite quarterbacks to go and, or elite players, just one of the offensive players, or, any good blue chip player. But you're also not bad enough that you're not bad enough to get one of those guys. You're not good enough to make a run in the playoffs. So you're always just mediocre right there. And that's what I'm afraid that the Falcons might have happen. But again, I do believe in this roster, and we'll kind of talk about them as a whole here in just a minute. So number 8 overall, Bijan Robinson. Number 38, Matthew Bergeron, offensive tackle out of Syracuse. And this was a low-key, very sneaky signing. I already talked about they re-signed their right tackle this last offseason. I think that this was a massive signing. Caleb McGarry on the right side. I think that Bergeron was someone that people really liked. Almost a first-round pick there. They have a lot of faith in him, and he can kind of sit for just a little bit of time. I really think that this offensive line has gotten a lot better over the last couple of years, and Bergeron, they're just trying to continue that and keep this O-line going, and I love to see that. Number 75 overall in the 3rd round, they take Zach Harrison, a defensive end out of Ohio State. In the 4th round, Clark Phillips, the 3rd cornerback out of Utah. And then they didn't have another pick until round 7. They took DeMarco Helliams, safety out of Alabama, and Jovan Gwynn out of South Carolina, a guard there. So I do like what they were able to do in the draft, and really trying to fill out some of those big holes on the roster while also having a little bit of a future aspect, future goal in mind. And I think it's a very, very good job by this entire group here. Now, a lot of people have been talking about how Arthur Blank is on the hot seat, and they did change their defensive coordinator for the team this last offseason. They brought in Ryan Nielsen. I don't really want to comment too much. They retooled the entire defense. They also changed the defensive coordinator. I don't really know how that's all going to mesh together. So, I don't want to specifically say whether I like that hire or not, just because I'm not sure. I'm not educated enough on his scheme and his system. Offense. I don't really know defense that well, to be honest with you. I'm not going to pull your leg on that. But the offensive side of the ball still have Arthur Blank. He's calling the plays. And, Terry Fontenot, the general manager, they've really built a good offensive system the last couple of seasons. I already talked about it a little bit. I think this offensive line is going to be very good. They've got a lot of depth there, as well as a pretty good starting group, a core group of 5. So I think that they're going to be just fine from that aspect. And, Desmond Ridder is a rookie, or well, second year now. He played 4 games at the end of last year, but he's basically a rookie, right? He needs that time in the pocket, and I think that this offensive line can give that to him this upcoming season. When the O-line is good, that means more holes for Bijan to get through. That means more time for plays to develop that Desmond Ridder can go to guys that we love for fantasy, right? Drake London, Kyle Pitts. And I think that this offensive line, they've done a great job keeping that whole. I think the defense is going to be much better, giving the offense more of an opportunity for touches, which is just a massive upswing for Dynasty for all these players. Now, all the players. Let's talk about these guys really quickly. The one downside is a lot of these guys are going near their ceilings in terms of fantasy value. That's not necessarily a bad thing. The problem is there's just not much room for growth. So you're buying these guys at the peak of their value, right? And what are you going to be able to get for it, right? You're not how do I want to say it? You're paying a lot for these guys, hoping that some of them, Kyle Pitts, for example, is going to pay off long term, right? But we just don't know for sure. So I think that there is a lot of opportunity here, and I think that if these guys can live up to that hype, it's not a problem that you have to buy them at their ceiling. That's kind of what I've been trying to boil down with this thought, right? Is it's fine to pay a lot for these guys as long as they live up to it, right? So I think that Desmond Ridder is going to be able to really bring these guys up and keep them valuable, but that's where it's a little bit of a question, right? All right, so now let's start talking with the quarterback, specifically Desmond Ridder. Desmond Ridder should be the starter for this team coming up, and he's currently ranked as the quarterback number 29. It's hilarious because all of the other players, Bijan is the number 1 dynasty ranked running back right now. You have Drake London, who's top 15 in terms of wide receiver. You've got Kyle Pitts, who's a top 5 option there. And for some reason, the guy that should be feeding them all the ball is number 29 overall. Yeah, Drake London is wide receiver 13 right now, and Kyle Pitts is tight end number 2 overall in terms of dynasty ranking. And you've got the quarterback at 29. Now, I do think that there's a little bit of upside with Desmond Ridder. And I've talked about this a little bit in the past, but you look at what Desmond Ridder was able to do, and everyone looks at the offense last year and says, well, Marcus Mariota, they didn't trust him to throw the ball. And Desmond Ridder comes in, and all of a sudden, they average, I think with Mariota, they were averaging about 27 passing attempts per game. I know there was a few games where he only had sub 15 passing attempts total. So average it all out, and I think Mariota was around 27 per game. Ridder comes in, and all of a sudden, they jump that up to 32. An extra 5 attempts per game just by switching from Mariota to Ridder. All of the games that Ridder started, he had 26 passing attempts or more, which is good to see. And again, this is at the time when they were out of playoffs. They were just kind of giving up. They were literally trying to run the clock out on a lot of these games. Now, Ridder didn't have the greatest fantasy performance, but he showed a decent amount, right? 26 attempts in his first start ever against New Orleans. Good defense. Only 13 completions, 97 yards. Not great, right? Next week, 22 completions for 218. Next week, 19 completions for 170. Last week, 19 completions for 224 and 2 touchdowns. All those, he had a few rushing attempts as well. Not the greatest. He's not going to be the most mobile guy. I do think that he has a little bit of that in his game, but, his first game ever, not the greatest. Instantly after that, he looks a lot better the last 3 weeks. And you got to take into account, all of these games, he didn't have Cordero Patterson, who was injured. He didn't have Kyle Pitts, who was also injured at the end of last year. He had Drake London, but that was pretty much it. He had Drake London and Tyler Algier were his only real options and threats in this offense. Now, I like Desmond Ridder more than QB 29. I have him around quarterback 21 to 20, somewhere in that range right there. I think that he can be a low-end quarterback too. with potential upside. And the reason why is, I get it. He's a 3rd-round pick. There's nothing tied to this guy long term. But they drafted him in the 3rd round. They didn't really bring in a lot of competition. I like Taylor Heineke, but he's not really a world beater. You go back to what he was able to do last year. He never even broke 300 yards in a game. I get it. He was decent for the Washington Commanders last year, but he wasn't a dynasty world beater, a fantasy world beater, or anything like that. He was a serviceable kind of player. He's got some moxie, to say like that. I do think that Desmond Ridder has more upside than a Taylor Heineke. They brought in Heineke to help Ridder, to help nurture him and grow him in this offense. And all of a sudden, you have Desmond Ridder with Drake London, Kyle Pitts, Bijan Robinson, and an entire offseason to get ready for that, to build a game plan around Desmond Ridder, to practice with Desmond Ridder. And I think that you're going to see a much improved Desmond Ridder this upcoming season. Now, the reason why I like Desmond Ridder a little bit more and why I think he's worth buying for what he's going in Dynasty right now is because if they make playoffs, they will be too high of a draft pick to take a high-tier quarterback. They would have to pay so much to trade from, if they make the playoffs, they're going to be picking at least number 18 to 19, somewhere in that range. So they're going to have to pay an arm and a leg to even get top 5 to get one of those quarterbacks next year. They'd have to hope somebody falls to the upper teens, right? The 12, 11, 13, somewhere in that range. 11, 12, 13, I guess I could have said it that way. Way less dyslexic in my head. But they would have to hope somebody falls there for them to trade up to get them. And even then, you're still paying quite a bit for that trade. So if they make the playoffs, basically Desmond Ridder is guaranteed another year. And this is all assuming that they make it with Desmond Ridder. They don't pull him for Taylor Heineke, right? Obviously. But if they make playoffs with Desmond Ridder, he's guaranteed 2023 and probably 2024. And this roster is getting good enough around him that I think that they can kind of pull him forward and carry him through a little bit more and extend that window where, yes, I don't think he's ever going to be a top 5 dynasty quarterback, but if you can get a mid to low tier dynasty quarterback, 2, right? A quarterback 2. I think that that's a huge value for what you have to give up for Desmond Ridder. I think he's going to have more serviceable games than he's going to hurt you for Dynasty. That's why I really like the value of someone like a Desmond Ridder. Now, you look at the running backs, obviously Bijan, like I said before, he's the current Dynasty running back number 1. We expect great things. I am a little hesitant. I just want to see it. I get it. It's stupid of an argument. Oh, he's such a talented guy. But part of me as an engineer, I guess, maybe this is my personality type, I want to see it a little bit before I believe it. I want to trust but verify it, essentially, right? And I am a little nervous that we've crowned Bijan too quickly, but I do love this guy's skill set. Everyone loves this guy's skill set, and he's basically a can't-miss prospect, so I don't mind paying a ton for Bijan. I don't mind valuing him that highly. It's just you got to be okay and ready to just admit defeat if something does happen. But I do think that he's pretty insulated in his value long term, so it's worth kind of investing in. Now, the guy I want to talk about a little bit is Tyler Algier, though, because I think Tyler Algier is being kind of disrespected a little bit for what he was able to do last year. I do think he's going to be the number 1 handcuff, and the fact that he had 1,000 yards last year, he was a 5th-round pick. I get it. Not a lot of draft capital. You're not really excited about this guy long term. But if, for example, anything happens to Bijan Robinson, Tyler Algier proved last year that he is a solid option. He ended the season. This was his last 4 weeks, right? 24, 16, 17, 15. For a 5th-round running back that you could probably get for a 3rd-round rookie pick right now, that is pretty good value. So I think that Tyler Algier is being disrespected a little bit more than he probably should be. I do think that he has more potential upside, and he's definitely a solid handcuff if you are the Bijan Robinson owner, right? So just something to keep in mind there, and worth looking into acquiring Tyler Algier, especially for the safety of mind, right? Knowing that if you have Bijan and he goes down, Tyler Algier is going to be plugged into a ton of usage there. All right, wide receivers. I do like that they're kind of building a basketball team on the outside. They brought in Matt Collins. They have Drake London. They brought in Scotty Miller. I honestly think those are going to be the top three guys here. They could still really use a second wide receiver in this offense, and maybe next year they'll reward us again and pair Drake London with Marvin Harrison Jr. How amazing would that be? Like I know this is a pipe dream and it'll probably never happen, but maybe a Xavier Worthy or somebody like that, just building this offense up, and it'd just be really fun to see them continue to build the offense in the first round. But obviously Drake London's the number one guy you want to own. He is the wide receiver 13, like I mentioned before. I have no problem with that. I do think that Drake London has a very high ceiling. And I know that a lot of people are kind of down on him. He didn't have the best season as a rookie, but the quarterback play was terrible last year. I mean, most of the time when he was with Mariota, it was just bad, man. I mean, he was having 30% of the target share with 7 passing attempts, which is terrible. That is terrible. They did not trust Marcus Mariota. Mariota was very, very bad last year. There's a reason why he disappeared from the show The Quarterbacks on Netflix, right? It was not meant to be for Marcus Mariota with this team. So I do think that Drake London has that wide receiver 1 potential in him. I think he can definitely make a claim to jumping up in the top 5 this year. He's a big dude, 6'4", 213, and he's fast, man. He is very, very fast. So I really want to see what they can do with an entire offseason with him and Ritter, and see how they can kind of cook up this offense around these guys, especially when you got Bijan, who should be a dangerous threat underneath, right? You got Kyle Pitts coming back from injury, and you got Drake London on the outside as well. This offense should be able to move at will as long as Ritter is decently capable, right? And that's why I do think that Ritter is being undervalued again one last time. All right, then the last guy I want to talk about is Kyle Pitts. And other than these 3 guys, right? So you've got Ritter, you've got Bijan, you've got Drake London, and Kyle Pitts, these 4 guys. I don't want anybody on this offense. I just do not care about the number 2 wide receiver for this team. If Drake London goes down, I think that they're just going to plug Cordero Patterson in, and I think that Cordero Patterson is just too old at this point in time. I don't really want to be investing in a 34-year-old guy just because he's big-bodied and everything like that. He's just breaking down right now, and I don't love to see it. So Kyle Pitts, I do like quite a bit, and I like the other 3 guys as well. Tight end number 2 overall for Dynasty. It is crazy that this guy has not fallen at all. That's the expectations. I'm going to be very interested to see what happens next year when Brock Bowers comes out, because if you like Kyle Pitts, Brock Bowers is going to be possibly drafted higher than Kyle Pitts. And I know that's crazy because Kyle Pitts was the number 4 overall pick, but dude, Brock Bowers makes Kyle Pitts look bad. Like, he is just such a good athlete for Georgia, and I want to see where he ultimately goes. But yeah, I want to see his dynasty value, how people kind of rank him, whether we're going to do the entire Kyle Pitts story all over again. But I do really like Kyle Pitts. I think that we're going to see a lot more. People have to remember his rookie year, he finished as the tight end number 6 overall. He had 110 targets, 68 catches, and this is from a bad Matt Ryan, a declining Matt Ryan. He had 1,000 yards, and I get it was a 17-game season, but last year it's been mentioned many times, Mariota was bad. Kyle Pitts was still getting targeted a lot. He played 10 games, had 59 targets. You take that over an entire 17-game pace, and it's a little bit less than his rookie year, but it's right around 100 targets still. He's still a focal piece in this offense, and I think he's going to be the number 1 or number 2 option for Arthur Smith still to utilize in the passing game. He's just such a freak of nature weapon. Now, his season did get cut short a little bit because of the injury, but I do think the fact that there was games where he had 8 targets, 7 targets, 9 targets, they tried to get him involved, but it just wasn't working with Mariota. And I think people are overlooking that fact that you want a tight end who's got 9 targets, man, especially in a PPR league. That's just so valuable. And I get it. It's not, 19 points isn't going to win you the week from the tight end position, but there's not many tight ends that can even put up 15 points on a regular basis. When you're getting that many targets, I do think that he's going to be so good for Dynasty. So I get it. Tight end number 2. It's possible that he doesn't live up to that, but again, I'm fine paying that price for someone like a Kyle Pitts, because if he does hit, man, and he's regularly putting up 15 to 20 points at the tight end position, that's going to be such a difference maker that, yeah, I think that it's definitely worth it. So that's my thoughts on the Atlanta Falcons. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this breakdown. I like putting these out. I like having the conversation, the back and forth with Dale. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to be here for this one, but like I said, we'll get him back here in the next couple of days. Until next time, let me know your thoughts about this down in the comments down below. If you can, please like the video, subscribe, do all you can. We're just trying to get it out there to more people. If you are a first-time listener and you've made it this far, I really do appreciate you guys checking it out. If you're one of the regulars, appreciate you guys too. You guys are awesome. I wish you guys would comment a little bit more. We want questions, guys. We want to hear from you guys. But, we still appreciate you regardless. So thank you guys so much for joining us. And until next time, have a good night.